I pay my respectable salute to all the martyrs who fought for the freedom of India. From Jhansi Ki Rani, Mangal Pandey to Gandhiji, all dreamt of an independent India. Chandrasekhar Azad, Bhagat Singh and Subhash Chandra Bose were those freedom fighters who never bothered about their life to fight for the independence of India. We fondly remember them and their sacrifice. One of them gave us the most revolutionary lines, far from Rangoon, "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga," and one of his slogan became the slogan of the nation, Jai Hind. Yes, I am talking about none other than Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. We fondly remember him through his daughter, Anita Bose. Today, she will take us back to those pages of history where the world was fighting Second World War, and on the other hand, Netaji and Emily Bose gave birth to a beautiful baby, Anita, today who is with us. That baby never thought that she will become the witness of the greatest battle, the battle of independence of India.
Anita, in the whole world, Subhash Chandra Bose's name is considered an example of patriotism. To you, however, he is your father, how you feel it?
As a doctor, I always had both aspects to consider. Of course, I consider the historical person, but also the personal side of it. And since since I was very young when he left, and I didn't really know him personally, of course, the personal image of the father was more the reflection of what I heard about him.
When you were little, you won't remember Netaji's face, but whatever you read or saw about him, which kind of image comes to your mind?
Well, the image changed over time. Of course, when I was a little kid, it was more the image of the father who was not there,
right.
whom I would have liked to be there. But as I grew older, I also sort of learned more about the public figure and the family figure in general, also his relationship to his Indian part of the family, not only to my mother.
Right.
And that, of course, added many facets, and I also came to appreciate the historical figure that he was.
Yes. In which situation your mother met Netaji first time?
My parents met in 1934 for the first time. My father had been released from prison on the condition that he would go abroad to get medical treatment because he was released because his health was very bad.
Right.
And Vienna was a center of medical knowledge at that time.
Right.
And so he went to Vienna and wanted to get treatment there. And at the same time, he was planning to work on a book. He had a contract from a publisher for the book, The Indian Struggle.
Right.
And he was looking for a secretary.
Yes.
So one of the Indian students ran an English conversation course in Vienna, and my mother was a member of that.
Right.
And my father approached this student and asked him whether he knew of any person who could work as his secretary.
Yes.
And so this student said, yeah, he knew of two ladies who might know enough English to help him in that. And so my mother went for a job interview to him, and that was in June of 1934. And
okay.
This is when they first met.
Oh, 1934.
Yes.
Perfect. Were you named by Netaji?
No, as far as I know, I was named by both my parents. Actually, I was named after Anita Garibaldi. She was the wife of the Italian patriot Giuseppe Garibaldi, who fought to unite Italy.
Right.
And his wife was still quite young, actively supported him in his armed struggle.
Right.
And in fact, there is a statue of Anita Garibaldi with a baby in her arms on horseback.
Yes.
In Rome, and my mother felt that this was a good name because it was both a European and an Indian sounding name at least, or an Indian name also. And on the other hand, the attitude of Anita Garibaldi was something which meant something to my father. So this is how I got the name. Of course, at that time it was a bit questionable whether this name would be acceptable. I was born in the then German Empire, and at that time very Germanic names were in vogue, and Anita was an Italian name, not a German name at that time, although today it is a very popular German name too. And so at that time it was not possible to name your children, give your children any foreign name. Even today there are some restrictions. And so my mother was a bit worried that Anita would not be acceptable, so in which case I would have gotten Anita as a second name, but as it turned out, Anita was okay, and so this is my first name, and the name by which I was also called.
All right, thank you. Would you like to be a practice in politics if you were in India?
Well, if I had been in India for a long time, it possibly might have been an option, but I'm not so sure that it would have been an option which would have suited me very well. Because I'm a very independent person and I want to be myself, not just the daughter of somebody or the wife of somebody. And I don't know whether I would have been able to be an independent person in my own right in India going into politics. Going into a totally different field like science or academics or so on, yes, but in politics I would always have been sort of tied to my father and looked upon as the daughter of my father. And it might even have been difficult to have my own opinion if it, according to some people, did not agree with what they thought my father would have thought.
Okay. So how many children you have?
I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. And the children are, of course, quite grown up now, and the grandchildren are, the oldest one is 21, and the youngest one is just 6 weeks old.
And you keeping an Indian name of your children. So what was the reason behind of that, keeping Indian names?
Well, both my husband and I have a very close and emotional tie to India, of course, and so we felt that giving them a European or a Western name and an Indian name would sort of combine the 2 backgrounds which children have. And in fact, my grandchildren also have Indian second names.
Great, thank you. Nice to hear that. Okay, how you feel when you went to India first time?
That's a long time ago, of course. I was about 18 at that time, and if I recall correctly what I felt at that time, of course it was a feeling of great expectation and excitement, because there are many things I did not know, and I of course imagined maybe in a different way from what the immediate experience was.
Yes.
And I think what probably struck me as the most surprising thing, which I did not expect to that degree, was the fact that my father was still held in very great affection, and surprisingly enough he still is. Even if I look at people who have never seen him, who were born long after independence, today I find that he is respected and loved by many. Of course, some don't know anything about the Indian independence struggle, but that's a different matter. But it's surprising how many do, and how many still hold great respect and affection for him. And of course, in 1960-61, when I visited for the first time, which is 50 years ago now, that was much more the case. I mean, there were many people alive, of course, who had seen him personally, who had known him personally, and the excitement was even greater then.
Yes, yes. Okay, so when you went to second time in India?
Much later. It was about, was in 1979, so it was about 19 years later, 18, 19 years later.
How do you feel when you step your father's native land?
Of course, the first experience was that of a strange land, but I was very surprised that within a very short time I developed an affinity and an emotional tie to the country, which of course was very different from visiting other countries.
Yes.
So in a way, I think that maybe blood is thicker than water, as they sometimes say, that India had this quality of a homeland even then, within a short period of time.
Perfect. Thank you. Netaji used to be a respect of his elder brother. So when you went to meet Sharad Babu, did he also respect you?
Well, I don't know whether you could say that you respect a 6-year-old child when my uncle, my second uncle, actually, my father had, after all, several brothers, and his favorite brother, to whom he was closest, was his second brother, Sharad,
Yes.
Chandar Bose. When he came to visit my mother and me in Austria, I was 6, and I think it was rather exciting for all of us. Of course, it was very exciting for me to meet an uncle, and he was the second person from that side of the family to me, whom I met. One of my cousins had come to visit earlier, and so he came with his wife and 3 of his children to meet us. And I think it was also exciting to him. I still remember my mother telling me that they had decided to come and visit in the afternoon, and then they were so curious that they showed up in the morning already. And in fact, I was out visiting a friend, so my mother had to get me back. And I remember my uncle took me on his lap and looked at me, and I think everybody says I resemble my father a lot, and so I think it was something that was also exciting for him.
Sure. Your picture, when I saw your picture and Netaji's picture, looks identical face.
Of course, if I recall the meeting, I think I was more interested even in the ladies in the party, my aunt and my cousins. My 2 cousins were 2 beautiful young women, and my aunt was a very impressive elderly lady. And I was very impressed by the sari and the prettiness and all
Yes,
that.
yes.
So that was almost more interesting than the old uncle and my other cousin. And I couldn't talk to my uncle, of course, but we sort of, with a few words of English that I knew, we sort of,
Because the language
at the time
barrier.
my mother had coached me to how to greet him and so on. And so that was a very nice meeting. And then I only met him a second time a year later when he went to Switzerland for medical treatment. And he asked my mother and me to join him and his wife there. And we spent about, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 weeks together in Switzerland. I don't know how long. And we used to take walks together, have meals together, and so on. And of course, my mother had more of a conversation with him and her sister-in-law. I sort of got to know him a little better then.
So how old are you when in Switzerland when you meet Chandar?
And I was about 7.
7. I mean 1 year later when you first met you in Vienna.
Yeah, in 48 we met for the first time, and I just had turned 6, and in fact some photos were taken on my 6th birthday with my mother, myself, and my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins, and my mother and myself. And then the year after, he went to Switzerland for the medical treatment, so I was, well, not quite 7 yet.
Anita ji, what do you consider your father's most important contribution to India's freedom? He wanted the people to understand the meaning of freedom before the gaining independence.
My father had, of course, many different roles over time, and I think one of his major contributions to India's freedom was the enthusiasm that he could inspire in other people in the fight for independence, because he himself was a very enthusiastic and patriotic leader with a lot of charisma and a lot of commitment. And in fact, I think that was one quality of many of the heroes of the independence struggle, that they really had a total commitment to their country.
Yes.
A very selfless commitment in many instances, sacrificing everything, including their lives very often for India's independence. And I think that, of course, meant something to other people who followed in that. And if anything, I think the everyday politics of any country differ in that respect. I mean, the everyday problems, negative developments like corruption and so on, give a negative example of leadership very often. And on the other hand, the Indian independence heroes really excelled by their personality, by their integrity and so on. And I think my father certainly was a very outstanding person that way. To quote